The rock and roll standard life can be incredibly boring after a couple of years. Quite fancy myself as a sportsman, and that all stopped, of course, when I went to university and to the art department, where it was very uncool to talk about any sort of sport. Yeah.
That was Bryan Ferry and Roxy music from way back when, in the mid-70s. And just a few years after the start of your music career. And lots of things have changed for you since that time. But you're still at it?
Yes, very much so.
Now, to talk a little about the early days of Roxy music, that was a band that, well, I remember when I first heard you, it must have been in the spring of
72, I think.
Yeah. I read about you in the NME, and it was this new, exciting and very different band.
Yeah, well, we felt it was kind of filling a kind of space that nobody else was operating in, really, at that point. We never felt we had any particular style, or that we slipped into any real kind of category so easily. We were kind of interested in lots of different kinds of music, you know, and so we're influenced by lots of different things, and it all sort of came together, and yeah, what came out was quite interesting, I thought. And yeah, the first, what I was thinking about, the first record we made, you know, was the first Roxy album. We hadn't all come from different bands as such. We were all kind of doing it for the first time, so it was very fresh and very exciting and all that.
Now, to borrow some words from the jazz terminology, most rock singers are sort of hot singers, but as for your style of singing, it's more a cool, sophisticated style.
Well, it's very kind of you to say so. I mean, I think that Al Green is kind of quite cool, and Marvin Gaye, and these are people I like very much, who are kind of very passionate, but at the same time there's a sort of laid-back quality which is rather nice. It's not kind of too forceful. I like forceful singers as well, of course, like James Brown and Wilson Pickett were very good at kind of belting things out, you know. That was never really my style as such. The most influential black singer on English singers, I think, in the sort of late 60s and 70s was really Ray Charles, of course. But that was never really my kind of thing, although I appreciated him.
I can't really
him.
Hear that in your voice.
It's not really there in me. I'm more kind of, yeah, the people I mentioned.
But these words like cool, sophisticated, are things that have been used about you in...
many times.
Yeah, and in other senses as well, as sort of the kind of image that you put over on stage, and kind of...
Well, you just do what comes natural, you know, and especially on stage, because you can't kind of fake it. You just have to do what you feel is right, or what moves feel. Not that it's well choreographed at all. Had some terrible insults about my stage dancing in the past. But no, you just kind of present the music and what feels like the right way as you feel it, you know, and. There are certain aspects of that visual side of that you can't really control. The thing of, you know, when you're photographed and stuff, and sometimes a certain kind of image manifests itself without you really controlling it much. It's difficult to explain, but you know, quite often I'm a cigarette in hand, because usually I'm hiding behind a cigarette, you know, whenever I see a photographer coming anywhere near, that kind of thing. Or in the past, I used to grab any girl that went by to sort of try and grab, you know, hide behind her hair or something.
The Roxy Music
Oh, yeah.
album covers
Sure.
with
Well, I sort
these
of
beautiful girls
Yeah.
and that sort of style. Is that kind of an image or image thing?
it just seemed like a fun way. It became a sort of corporate image, as it were, yes, for the group, because after we'd done the first album, I thought, oh well, I've got to do the cover now, and it felt natural for me to do it because I'd studied painting, and that's how I'd come into music, from that world, from the art world. And I was always interested in the idea of commercial art. And I'd studied at Newcastle University under a great painter called Richard Hamilton, who's called the grandfather of English pop painting. And he was a very big influence on my art and subsequently the music in terms of attitude and coolness of approach to it, and trying to get as many ideas and compressed into anything that you did, and the pop painters would use kind of icons from pop culture as subject matter for the pictures. So paintings, as you've probably seen with Andy Warhol, paintings of soup cans or Coke bottles and this, that, and the other. Because that's very much a part of the fabric of everyday life, things that you see, as well. It's like the landscape of urban life, And similarly, I thought to do the first cover with just like a picture of the guys in the band, so it's looking kind of moody, it would be a bit boring and a cliche. And I thought if you're going to do a sort of cliche, let's do something really glamorous and appealing. And so I used a sort of pin-up girl, sort of glamour girl. And that worked incredibly well. It seemed to fit, whether it was because I'd helped design it, it seemed to, and had written the music as well. The two things seemed to fit together somehow. And so it worked. It still looks good, the first cover to me. It looks kind of right for the music. It's strange.
And you
so
continued
that continued. It sort of led into a series. It's rather like when you see a lot of books by the same author in a bookshop, and the publishing company puts a similar kind of jacket on each one, and there's a sort of continuity to it, And so, yeah, one thing led to another. So the second one was Amanda Lear, who later became a singer in her own right, sort of with this Black Panther on a leash. Each one was a sort of glamorized picture of womanhood. And it seemed to work very well. It seemed to fit the thing somehow.
Have you been attacked by sort of feminist women lived for this?
Oh, not at all, no. Absolutely not. No, I think it... no.
It didn't take long till you started working with projects aside from the Roxy Music things, and
sure.
Your first solo album came just a short time after the first Roxy album.
It came after the second Roxy album.
Yeah.
And like all of them, it was kind of, it took a lot out of me. I always kind of put a lot into it. I come from an old-fashioned school in terms of attitude. Of I like to kind of sweat hard over my work. And the second one was For Your Pleasure, and it's still one of my favourite ones. And anyway, after that, as if to kind of clear it out of my system or something, I kind of did very quickly a very different type of record. It was a solo record, in as much as a Bryan Ferry under that name, but obviously with lots of different players, or a sort of a different group of people, in fact. And it was very different from the Roxy work, where I'd been writing the songs. All the songs were very kind of precious to me. I felt that was my main work. And this was like a holiday from it, doing things like Hard Rain's Gonna Fall and These Foolish Things, just great songs that I liked very much, obviously. And I thought it was an interesting selection of songs, because it was from different periods of pop music's development, and people who'd influenced me. And that turned into a separate career that ran in parallel. with what I felt was my main work with Roxy, doing these solo albums of other songs, and it was very interesting to do. And till finally, I guess, years and years later, the two kind of merged into one.
You started out your solo career by doing covers of old standards.